St. Vital. We played baseball and hockey and at school tried a little basketball. They had soccer practices 8 in the morning and that was too early for me, so I didn't bother. And then played golf after when we got to our teenage years, just played at it. Yeah, there was enough that we could always get a football team and a baseball team and hockey because we were young and we were only allowed to play on the side of the rink when the big guys had the middle. Oh boy, it would be I guess in the 40s, early 40s maybe. I'd be maybe 8 years old, 7 years old. I played hockey at a place called the Cardinal Rink on the corner of Hague Avenue and Demurin. And there was really no organized hockey there. At that time, we were a little too young, and they had some Bantam A's and Bantam B teams. But by the time I was old enough to play Bantam, they had folded at Cardinals. So we didn't play. I guess it was, let's see, it would be 1944, I guess, when I played my first Bantam hockey. And that was at a community club called Windsor. It's still there. I always played goal. I don't know why I did, but I always did. I never played anything but that and enjoyed it and was too dumb to know, I guess, that you could get hurt. I was lucky. I got a set of goal pads. They weren't great ones, but they were goal pads, and I was really young then, and we would play on the side of the rink, like I say. The big guys played in the middle, but I had a set of goal pads, so now you want to come and play with us, kid? And because they could shoot and raise, and they had a goalie, and so I got a good experience playing with some of those fellows. They were, quite a bit older than I was. They were similar to a cricket pad, but they were a hockey pad. It was before the pillow kind of goal pads around. There was none of those around when I was a kid, or at least we didn't have any. But, they were. And then you would get blue felt and put a couple of layers of blue felt in behind the original pad so that it wouldn't hurt when you got hit. When we first started the first year, I guess when I played for Windsor Community Club back in about 44 or something like that, a fellow by the name of Jim Simister. I can remember him. He was the first coach we ever had. And it was all, volunteer in those days. And I played 1 year out there basically because there was a couple of friends of mine playing back then, a fellow by the name of Bruce Bell, who I grew up with all my life. And then another fellow who was Bruce was a year older than I was. And then another fellow from the neighborhood, George Crosswaite, which was a good hockey player. He was a year older than Bruce, and we started playing Bantam together. So George went after 1 year of Bantam B. He went to Bantam A, and there wasn't any at Windsor. So he went to Escaldonan. He ended up playing with Excelsiors, with Andy Bathgate's older brother, Frank. And then Bruce, he graduated a year before I did. So I ended up leaving Windsor and going to Norwood Falcons and played Bantam B down there. From our Bantam hockey, we had one good line. It was Ernie Bourgeois, Johnny Mosel, and Leo Fauché. And we had, I think we had 3 defensemen, and we had another kid who was, and I don't even remember some of their names now, but I know we had one great line and then another line that was not that great, and then some defensemen that I don't even remember. We had a coach by the name of Mike Cook, who had coached at Falcons for years. And then we played against Herbie Burns' Red Wings. It was Red Wing Cartage he owned. And they were from Fort Rouge, and there was Charlie Lumsden played over there in those days, and Peacock and McFadden and fellows like that. And it was good Bantam League. And we had another team in Norwood, which was a good team, and they had Jimmy Zary and Johnsons and Carius and Konowalchuk, and they had some good hockey players there too. One fellow I played with most of my life, Don Johnson, a defenseman. He, when we were even as far up as junior, he was in the top 10 in scoring in junior hockey in those days in 1951 and that. And he was in the Toronto chain, and he was the same kind of a defenseman as Frank Mathers. Not a hitter, but tremendous with the stick, and, you know, he would ride you in the boards, but he wasn't rough. And we were Toronto property, and I think that killed him from going to a lot farther in hockey. He went into senior hockey with Sioux Greyhounds, and then he went into the RCMP, and he just gave hockey up as far as making it a career. Just in Norwood, the one year when we were with Norwood Falcons and some of the fellows who were playing at Norwood Athletics, which is the Flood Bowl down there. And there was a good rivalry there. And actually with, there was two other teams, I guess. There was Fort Rouge, who we knew a lot of the fellows who played there, and they're Davy Traynor and Charlie Lumsden and McFadden and Peacock and guys like that. Fellows that we played hockey against for a lot of years. And then one team in the North End with Nicky Hill, Eddie Peters, Billy Tishko, a defenseman, and there was Bill Barriga, another one that's well known around the city. They played with a thing called YMCA Bulldogs. Well, there was three indoor ones then. There was the old amphitheater and the old St. John's College rink and the Olympic, but we never got to play in any of those. We played a bantam final in the amphitheater because the ice was all gone out of all the other rinks. It had, you know, the sun had come out and they had melted. So that was a big thing. We got to play one game in the amphitheater, and there was no dressing room, so you went upstairs. There was a huge room in the amp upstairs, and you dressed upstairs and then went down and played. But I can remember that. And we couldn't get indoor ice until you became midget. And then you could play in the old Olympic rink. And they used to have 2 midget and 2 juvenile games every night. 1 midget and a juvenile, another midget, and the late game was a juvenile. So you had to wait till you became midget to play indoors. Memories? Yeah, a lot of memories. We won a midget championship there, and we also won a juvenile championship in the Olympic. But that's where you played most of your indoor hockey then, was once you got to midget, you were indoors. That was good. I watched the last game, what was it, the 49 or whatever. Brandon Wheat-Kings played one game in here against Montreal Royals, and I got to see that game, and that was good. And I also my uncle came in, they lived out of town, and he took me to a Portage Terrier game in a playoffs in Winnipeg, and those were 2 memorable games, watching Portage play and, you know, hearing about all those fellows all your life, and that was something, and then to play baseball against some of them after. Toronto Maple Leafs, we could hear them on the radio on Saturday night with Foster Hewitt. And then the big line of Apps, Drillin, and Davidson. God, that was something then, and Turk Broda, and back to those days. I think that was a Saturday night. You had to listen to that on the radio. So that was wonderful. We took 2 teams out of Norwood and amalgamated them, and we became Monarchs. And I played all my midget, juvenile, and junior hockey with Winnipeg Monarchs and thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was a nice organization. Had some nice people there. Mike Christiuk, who coached St. Boniface Seals to a Memorial Cup. He was our midget coach. And our juvenile coach was a fellow by the name of Bob Sykes. He was still playing defense with Rio Flyers at the time. And then in junior, Walter Monson, who was a real gentleman. Well, I watched one fellow actually deteriorate as a hockey player, Gabby Pankhurst. He played so long in junior that he never really improved, and he stuck out in my mind. But there was a lot of good hockey players around at that time, and with Brandon, and you know, they all had. Everybody seemed to have an abundance of decent hockey players at that time. So. And with the Lakehead, they had a good team. In fact, that's where Nick Hill played when I last played against Nick, was down in Port Arthur, and with a fellow Leo Boyven, and who made it to the big time, and that. Then in junior, the year we did get to the Memorial Cup, that Barrie Flyers team was one of the best teams that I ever saw in my life. And they had Labine and Topazzini and Jimmy Morrison and Real Cheverfield, Dougie Mones. There's a few names that all made it pretty good in the old 6-team league. So they were good. They were better when they had a penalty than we were with when we had 6 men. That's the first team that I ever saw take a puck when they were a man short and keep it. And that's how they played all the time. They would not shoot that puck away unless they absolutely had to. If they could win the face-off, they would take it back in their own end and pass it. And they controlled. And it was more like a pro team, the way that Ems had them coached and everything else. It's the best junior team I saw, and I watched the 46 Monarchs and the Brandon Club, and to me, they didn't hold a candle to these guys, and I haven't seen a junior team since that was as good as that Barrie Flyers team. Yes, it was. Brandon had a good hockey team with Ron Romer and fellows like that, and they had won the league, and we managed to beat them, and we had a pretty good hockey club. We fellows like Elliot Chorley and Bruce Bell and this Don Johnson, the defenseman, and Bill Barriga, and we had some good players on our team. Laurie Mitchell, and unfortunately most of them are dead now. And the Lake had Port Arthur. They had a good club down there. Junior Wilson and Boyven was their main guy. Nicky was a grinder from day one, and he'd give you 120% every night. But yeah, there was lots. And then in Lethbridge, they had Eddie Litzenberger, and they had a big line of Litzenberger, Cowan, and Smith, and some good defensemen, Tony Schneider, and a fellow who ended up in Winnipeg after playing with us, Bernie Gerbinski. He was on that junior team. But no, I felt very fortunate to get as far as we did. Yes, I had signed a C form with them, and the old scout was a guy by the name of Squib Walker. Yeah, with Toronto. It wasn't one of the things that I really worried about. I went to a training camp. I went to Toronto's camp with Pittsburgh and was there and could have stayed east and didn't. I came back, and maybe one of the things, I was the only kid in the family, and I figured my mom and dad had given me quite a few good years, and I knew they would rather have me at home, so I think that's one of the reasons I came back. But I never really regretted it. Yeah, in Pittsburgh at that time, they had Danny Lewicki and Ray Timgren and lots of good players like that. And at that time, I guess there's a fellow who played goal for Pittsburgh for years, Baz Bastine, and he got hit in the face and lost an eye. And that's when Gil Mayer had gone and came up with Pittsburgh then. And he was on his way up to Toronto just about that time. So there was Don Lockhart, and another fellow at that camp was Donnie Campbell from out west. He was from Saskatoon, who I played against after that. And myself, and there was a couple more. I can't remember their names now. And I guess from Winnipeg, there was Don Johnson and Elliot Chorley and Bill Barriga and myself. We were at Pittsburgh camp that year. Well, Danny Lewicki, I laugh at him because he'd bet guys in the seats quarters. Bet you I can score from here on that kid. Bet I can do this and that. And Lewicki was quite a talent. And, I had seen him play in the Lakehead and with their Port Arthur club. And he was good, and there wasn't too many old guys. There was an older defenseman. He was from the Lakehead, Pete Backer. He was from down there. And some of the guys I can't remember, Johnny, oh God, I forget. Some of them ended up going into the Western League, and then they played in that American League. And Eric Nestorenko was at that camp. That's the first year I met Eric. And it was funny because they were calling guys up they wanted to go to either Toronto or Pittsburgh, and they were signing them that day. And so Eric was there, and they called him up, and he went up, and about 15 minutes later, he come back, and I said, well, you going to Pittsburgh? He said, are you nuts? I said, why? What do you mean? He said, I'm going back to junior. I can make as much money or more playing junior than I can going to Pittsburgh. He said, that's no good. He said, I can make $150 a week playing junior. Why do I want to go there? So that was my first experience with Eric, and he went back to junior. No, I never did go anywhere. I stayed in Winnipeg, and that's my first year when I played with Winnipeg Maroons. Maroons, they first organized the Maroons team. A fellow by the name of Sheriff Murray Kyle, and a lawyer, Bill Johnson. They ran the Winnipeg Maroons. And I'm trying to think, and I guess Joe Matheson was the coach that year. Moan Joe, that's a long time ago. But that was the first year, right in my year out of junior, and that's when they used to have the old league with War Road, Crookston, Thief River Falls, Roseau, and Grand Forks. And we used to go down there and play twice a week, once on Wednesdays and once on Sunday usually. And sometimes you'd get a weekend down there. But we would play and practice with Maroons, which was great for me to have somewhere to work out and also play. But that was the early Maroons club. No, it wasn't built yet. We were still working in the old amphitheater. Let's see, that's got to be back in, where are we going here? That's got to be back in 52, 53 is the first year senior with Maroons. Yeah, and we were still in the amphitheater. I forget what year Warriors came. Was it 55 or 58? Whatever year the Warriors came to Winnipeg, that's when the new arena was built. Yeah, they went into the arena after that. But no, we played a few years with Maroons. And then, in fact, we went to Penticton to play in a best-of-7 series out there, and I thought we'd never get home. We were gone for 3 weeks. It turned out to either be 8 or 9 games. That was the year that Penticton beat us out. Then they beat Sudbury out, and they won the Allen Cup, and then they represented Canada the next year. And I'm not sure if it was in the Olympics or the World. But that was a good team we had, too. We had Bill Justa and Pete Langell, Billy Robinson, and a whole bunch of lessers, like Kenny Little, who just passed away. He was with that club. And Jimmy Young was another name, and Bruce Bell, a good friend of mine. But that was really something. No, not really. I wasn't superstitious or anything like that. No. I roomed with a fellow, Jimmy Young, who was very superstitious in the same Penticton series when we were out there. If we won a game, he wore the same clothes, and if we had a sleep before game, everybody had to be there and do the same thing. And he was very superstitious. But no, that's the only one that I knew of that was that bad. Uh, I guess you were used to it. You never had a mask. You didn't know what they were like, and you either got your head out of the way or you got hit. And I only put my head in the way once, and that's a hang of a lesson to learn. We were playing in the Lakehead against Port Arthur in the finals, and we were down a goal, and they got a two-man breakaway, and fellow came in. He shot, I sprawled, made the save. The puck went right back out to the trailer, and he took a slap shot, and as I was laying down, I threw my head up. It hit me in the throat. I thought I was going to die. I never did that again. But that's my only instance of really getting hit that I had intentionally put my head there. But no, you got used to not playing with a mask. I guess you didn't, there was no such thing, so you didn't worry about it. Actually, when we were playing senior hockey with Maroons, I guess the first one I saw with a mask was Julian Klimke. And Julie was a goalkeeper with us, with Maroons, but he had been an assistant trainer to Lefty Wilson with Detroit. And he would be the backup goalkeeper when Terry Sawchuk was there. And Lefty Wilson made him a mask, and that's the first one I saw. So when I saw that, I said, well, I think I could make those. So I started making them, and that's when I made one for myself and had my wife mold my face, and went from there and got into making goal masks and did that for a number of years. Yeah, well, those ones there, to get a molded mask, I started making them for kids because they were so ruddy expensive. When, $100 to a guy was a lot to put into a goal mask, and that's what a lot of those guys wanted. So I started making them for $25. I wasn't making money. I got lucky. I found out where I could buy material from Park Hannison and went there and told the fellow what I wanted it for. And he said, well, if you're doing that, he said, I'll give you a cost price on everything that you need. So that's how I got into making goal masks. That was great. I started right out of junior, went to Maroons and played there for a few years. And then I quit. I quit hockey. And when we had a couple of young kids at home, and that were, I guess, no, we didn't even have any kids then. I know what happened. They started with a senior league, and it was a Big Six. Do you remember that? They had Manitoba and Brandon and clubs like that. And Maroons folded. They closed up Maroons. And I was supposed to go and play with Manitoba, but I didn't feel that I would be capable or ready, and not to what I wanted to play, because there was no place to practice, and you were just playing games. And I thought, no, that's not good for me. So I quit there, and then Murray Balagas asked me if I would go to Warroad. So I went there for one game and thought, nah, I didn't really care to do that, because I was still just playing, one game a week, no practices. So I quit. And then I was away from hockey for at least 4 years, and that was really something how I got back into it. Winnipeg Maroons were going overseas the first time to go to Czechoslovakia, and they had a stag. And I phoned this fellow who used to play with Maroons, Bruce Bell, and I said, hey, I think we should go to this. They're trying to raise some money. They're going overseas. And so he said, okay. So we went to the stag that night. And while I was there, one of the fellows who was with Maroons for years, Charlie Madden, and that's Guy Madden's dad, he came to me and he said, how'd you like to come overseas with us? I said, Charlie, can you sneak me in your bag and I'll just stow away? He said, no, I'm serious. I said, what do you mean? he said, we have to take two goalkeepers, and we don't have them. Jim Henry had been playing with Maroons then, and Gordie Dibley, and apparently Jim couldn't get away. So I said, geez, Charlie, that'd be a heck of a trip. I said, but I don't even play that game anymore. And he said, well, if you'd like, maybe you could go. And I said, I don't even know if I could play anymore. So about an hour later, Gordie Simpson, who was coaching the club, he said, Charlie said you might be interested in coming. He said, we have to take two goalkeepers. The CAHA said we have to. So I said, Gordie, I don't even know if I could stand up on those things anymore. It's been 4 years. He said, well, you wouldn't have to play. You just have to come and be there just in case. He said, but you'd have to come to practice. And it was about a week or a bit before they were going. And it was just towards the Christmas season. And we had just had our first young one, and so I said, well, I'll have to check with my wife on that one. So I went home and talked to my wife about it, and she said, well, that'd be a heck of a trip. I said, yeah, but we just had a baby in October. And she said, don't worry, I'll go and move in with my mom for that time you're away. So I went and found my old gold skates and my old belly pad and some gloves, and away I went to practice. I got as far as the suite door that night, stood there, and she said, what's the matter? I said, I don't know if I want to go there or not, or if I can even play. So I went, and I worked out for a week with them and worked like heck, and that was it. So that's how I got back to Maroons, just going overseas for that trip. So we got to the airport that day, and I walked in, and the guys are all laughing, and they're going, ha ha, you're it. I said, what do you mean I'm it? I'm here for a 3-week holiday, and leave me alone. And they said, no, you're it. I said, what? He said, well, Gordie Dibley's wife just lost the baby, and he's not coming for the first 3 games. So we went to Czechoslovakia for... I never had so much attention from some people in all my life. Poor old Terry Hind, he just about lived with me. Are you okay? Do you think you'll be all right? How's this going to be? I said, Terry, whatever's going to happen's going to happen. We'll find out when we get out there. And we went to a place called Pilsen for the first game. And they beat us, I think, 3-1. But we didn't do bad. We were outdoors, and I didn't let in anything that was, it shouldn't have gone there. So that was all right. And then I guess I played another 2 games, and I think we won 1 and tied 1. And I'm not sure if we got a shutout in one of those games or we won it 2-1. I can't remember. But anyway, we got through the 3 games that I had to play. So that's how I got back to Winnipeg Maroons. How we got overseas... They had got a trip in some way. They were given a trip. But then after we came home, I said to my wife, I don't think it's fair that I should just walk away, because I knew they needed another target for the other end of the rink. So Gordie Dibley was a basic goalkeeper. So I went for the rest of the year and played with them. And then they said, well, how about coming back next year? And at that time... I was building a house, and I said, well, I don't think I can. And they said, well, how about could you play a bit of intermediate hockey with St. Pierre? And if we get to the playoffs and we need you, we could pick you up then. And I said, well, okay, because that didn't start near as early as they did. So I did that, and then they were going somewhere in the playoffs, and I ended up going down with them, I guess, and they lost out. I think that's the first year they went into an Allen Cup final. And I guess we got down there, and then all of a sudden something happened to Dibley there, and I ended up getting stuck for a couple of games there and played a couple there, and that was all right. But no, I played off and on with Maroons, and and then we went overseas again, and I was back playing with them, and I played then some over there, and then we came back. Yeah, we played. Well, we played it at home when we. That was the first series we played in Winnipeg. As far as the Allen Cup final, it was played here against Woodstock. But we, well, you always played against the Lakehead, and then you would always go west and play there. But on this was a time that lots of them came to Winnipeg, so we were all right that way. They had a lot of good senior teams out west in those days, and Saskatoon always had a good club, and they had a lot of old ex-pros and guys out of the American Hockey League and things like that. That's what senior hockey kind of was in those days. A lot of guys on the way up or on the way down. Um, we got lucky, or I got lucky. I don't know which. We had a good hockey club. We won four straight, and in fact, we got out of the four games we had two shutouts. And, so we had a good team, yeah. And the guys had played together for a long time, and we had a lot of older guys like Danny Summers and Sheldon Bloomer and, fellows like that. And then, Ross Park and Reggie Abbott and, a lot of good hockey players out of the city here. It was around then. Billy Johnson, Al Johnson, who I figure is probably one of the smartest hockey players I ever played with, and that he learned a lot when he was with Detroit, and he knew how to play the game. And between him and Bill Jusda were two of the ones that I admired. They had a couple of guys, but I can't remember their names now, that they had a good hockey club, and but we finally got a chance to play at home, and I think the guys just really wanted to win that series. That's all. So we were fortunate, but we played well. The year that Warriors came, and they needed another target, so I went there to work out with them, and that's where they had their training camp, was in the Olympic rink. That was really something. Like, no showers. Like, they had a shower, but it was so old and rickety and hardly any heat in that building. Oh, yeah, there was some guys were just about, well, this Paul Masnick, he had just come down from Montreal, and I laughed. We were in the dressing room, and he's really bitching because he's used to, all the conveniences of the NHL. And Gordy Mackey was the trainer of that club. And it was really funny. Masnick was beefing about his underwear and this being wet and nothing's dry. And he was tempted to, he's running down Gordy as what kind of an idiot trainer is this and that. We were sitting in there getting ready to practice on a Saturday morning, I guess it was. And Freddie Shiro said to Gordy, he said, "Did you watch the Friday night fights last night, Gordy?" And yeah, I was watching that. He said, "Well, I was noticing this one guy, and he was doing this, and the other guy was doing that, and this guy couldn't seem to hit him." And he said, "Did you notice that?" And Gordy said, "Yeah, but this guy here should have been doing such and such," because Gordy was a hell of a boxer. And I laughed. These guys are talking about that, and Masnick's sitting there, and after this, he said, "Who the hell is he anyway?" I said, "Well, he used to be one of the best amateur boxers in the city." I said, "Lucky you didn't have a go at him, Paul." And poor old Masnick had a lot more respect for Gordy after that. Well, Bill Jusda, as a defenseman, he was very talented, I thought. He was the greatest hitter I had ever watched, through body checks and things like that. And he was smart with the puck. When he had it in your end of the rink, you had confidence that Bill was going to do the right thing. Another one that I thought was very smart was Al Johnson. I saw Al when he came out of junior and then he went away to play, and when he came back from Detroit, he was really smart. He was a great wingman, and he could make a lot of plays. And the year, I'll give you one story about him. The year we went with Father Bauer, when they brought the national team to Winnipeg and amalgamated it with Maroons, they had a defenseman with the national team, Gary Begg, and who was a good skater and good player, good defenseman. And when we would practice, Begg would come around the net and try and beat his way through everybody. And Al Johnson used to say, "Gary, throw me the puck on the wall and you keep going and just yell, middle or boards." And he said, "I'll give it to you." He said, "I'll give you $1 for every time I don't give it back to you." Well, this went on all year, and it was really funny. We were overseas playing, and Begg came around the net one night, and Johnson was there, and he threw him the puck, and he yelled middle, and he had a breakaway right from the blue line in. And he came back after and said, "What a heck of a play." And he said, "That was so easy." And I said, "That's what he's been trying to tell you all year long. Give it to me and tell me where you want, and I'll give you $1 for every time I don't give it back." So it took 2/3 of a year for Begg to learn that. But Al was very talented as far as I was concerned. In senior hockey with playing against Penticton that year, they had the Warwicks, the whole three brothers, Dickie, Grant, and Billy. And Grant Warwick was a good, smart hockey player. Billy was a pain in the neck, and Dickie was part of the package. If you got the other two, you had him too. And they had a defenseman down in the Lakehead we used to play against all the time, Bob Drainville. He was another good one. And they had a lot of guys out west. It's hard to remember them all. Donnie Campbell, the goalkeeper with Saskatoon, he spent a couple of years just in Toronto as a backup goalkeeper. And then he got fed up with that and came home. And a lot of the fellows that played with that Warrior team were a lot of good hockey players on that. Like there was Freddie Shiro and Danny Summers, Skippy Burchill and Eddie Mazer and Mike Nikolic and the Cullen brothers and Nestorenko. And, for a first-year hockey club, they had a heck of a hockey team. And after that, I think Toronto and Montreal both kind of shafted parents and wouldn't give them the good hockey players. But no, I was fortunate to, be associated with them for that year just as a target. And it was a lot of fun. Toughest? Bill Jusda. So toughest I knew. Bill could fight on skates. Not that he fought that often in senior, but he could. And look out, he could throw punches quicker than anybody I saw. He was so strong on those skates, it wasn't even funny. A couple of guys that I didn't play with, I played against a guy by the name of Laboda. He was, he was dirty and mean. And I saw him cut Fred Dunsmore one night he wore a big ring when he was playing. And he'd love to fight, and he would drop that mitt and he'd hit you before you'd have a chance. And he cut Fred real bad, but he was about the meanest that I saw. Well, Father Bauer needed somewhere to play, and Winnipeg drew real well. Like senior Maroons always drew well here because we were bringing international teams in prior to that. We had the Czechs and the Russians and everybody over to play Maroons. So it was a great place for him to put his hockey club. And what it did for Winnipeg, as far as the Maroons went, that was the end of the Winnipeg Maroons right there when they amalgamated with Father Bauer. And I felt sorry in a lot of ways because we had a lot of older hockey players, and like Danny Summers and Sheldon Bloomer and guys like that, they played most of the year, and then they were just kind of cast aside for the kids, because that's who Father Bowers was worried about. He wasn't worried about a bunch of us old guys. So I was sorry to see that, actually. I don't think it did anything for senior hockey here. It was good for Father Bauer because they played a lot of games. We played against the Central League in that, and it was convenient. It was great when I was just with Maroons. It was wonderful with Father Bauer's team. I don't know. I didn't like the format the way it was, and but we went to that world tournament in Tampere, Finland. But we had a tour before that of about 3 weeks, and it was like a pickup team. We picked up guys, Henry Ackerval from the Lakehead and Ricky Hay and some Granny Moore from down east. And when we left Winnipeg, we had a certain amount of guys, and we picked them up on the way as we were going. And we had a pre-tour of, Germany, Finland, and I forget where all, Russia, with a lot of the old Maroons. And that fellows like Lou Joyle were still there, and Elliot Chorley, and some of them, they were part of it. And then when they were ready to play the tournament, a lot of the fellows were cut, and they brought over all the younger guys. And some of them I didn't believe in. They converted one guy, a kid by the name of Paul Conlon. He was supposed to be a forward, and they tried to make him into a defenseman, and, he never did work out as far as I was concerned, but he played in that tournament, and a little favoritism shown, and I didn't like the setup, to be quite honest with you. They were real good. That's when they had Ragulin and the big guy and Kuskin on defense, and they had the Marovs, and they had a little goalkeeper. It was before Tretiak. They had Konovalenko and Drazila and some guys. They had a lot of good hockey players. And the Czechs at that time, we had played 1 year against them. Nadamansky, who was with the Czechs then. And there was loads of good hockey players over there. And the Russians, they had a B team that was just about as good as their A team. They played a control style, but they didn't play rough hockey. But what they call now the pick play, that interference play, that was the Russians and the Czechs worked that to perfection in their own end. They picked off more forecheckers than enough. But that was a business with them. We got to know some of the fellows, especially the Czech fellows, pretty good. And like the Russian team, they played hockey 12 months of the year. They had a couple of weeks holiday on the Black Sea, and that was it. And that was their life, was hockey. And some of them played for Red Army, and they all played club teams, but they were the chosen few that were playing on the national team too. The first time we went to Czechoslovakia, in that one there, we ended up fourth. I think they ended up fourth a lot of years. Yeah, I think the Russians won it, and then the Czechs, and then the Swedes, and then ourselves. But we never beat the Russians, the Swedes, or the Czechs in that tournament. We lost those games to them. That was another one of my free trips that I wasn't supposed to have to do anything. I played the pre-tour, and then they brought Kenny Broderick was their goalkeeper, and he came over and he played the tournament till they got shelled one night by the Czechs, and then unfortunately I got stuck in for a couple. I ended up playing against the Russians and the Swedes. It was over. I look back on it. I had a good time and met a lot of great people and still have a lot of those friendships today. And As far as being over and I was disappointed about it, no, I knew it was time that I had got a few extra years playing with Maroons when I came back just to fool around and ended up playing permanently. But no, it didn't. I realized that I was older and I wasn't of that caliber anymore. You could get yourself up for it, but it wasn't the fun that it used to be. So I thought, well, if it's not that much fun, enough. And that's how I left it. We had one Maroon reunion, and then we had one with the old Monarch team a few years back, courtesy of Ross Park. But there's not many of the Maroon Monarchs left. Like in that picture I showed you, there's more dead than alive. I don't know, it makes you appreciate people a lot. And it makes you realize that you need a lot of cooperation out of a number of people if you're ever going to get anywhere. It's not an individual game, that's for darn sure. And it helps you through life, I think. It gives you a different outlook on life that you gain through being involved with all these people and trying to cooperate and trying to work together and just it's not all about you. So I think you take that through your life, to a degree and try and sort things out, which you might not have if you hadn't have had the luxury of being involved in sport. Well, my wife bugs me, and I played goal in hockey, and I was a catcher in baseball. And she says, yeah, and look at your knees now. Did you enjoy those Sunday double headers and, all the whacks you got in goal and everything else? And she kind of bugged me about that. But, it takes its toll. There's no doubt about that. And the two positions that I played are just killers on your legs. There's no doubt about that. So I suffer with that now. But I think that to look back on it all, you wouldn't trade it.